some common questions we often want to answer when reviewing a chart are: what kind of trend are we currently in and how strong is it? How does the short-term action affect the long-term trend? And how are we trending in the long term as opposed to the short term, or vice versa? And there are a lot of common ways of answering this question, and not a few of them will involve calculating some sort of moving averages and then comparing the moving averages as well as current price position in relation to them to tell how we're doing in the short term and long term. So Trend Radar is a new indicator with heat map-like visuals, as you can see over here, that try to give you a kind of bird's eye view of the current trend and make this process a lot easier to answer those questions. It's set to help you gauge both short and long-term trend at a glance, and makes it simple to identify pullbacks and trend moves across different periods. So what Trend Radar does is it first calculates and tracks the values of 5 exponential moving averages from very short term or very fast to very long term or very slow period. These EMAs have customizable look back periods. And on every bar, to get that heat map like visual, the indicator plots a column of 5 squares. And each square represents the current price's position relative to one of these 5 exponential moving averages. If the current price is above that EMA on that bar, say it's the very short-term exponential moving average, if price is above that one, then the square for that period will be represented as green. And if it's below that EMA for the current bar, it'll be drawn red. So here we have Trend Radar's visual, and we can see that on every bar, we have these columns of 5 rows of squares. And these rows are arranged from top to bottom to represent the very short term, the short term, medium term, long term, and very long term EMA values. So for example, if we look here at this point in the heat map where we have these 2 red squares in the top row, what this is telling us is that in the very short term, so for the very fast EMA, current price is below that trend, that EMA. But for the longer term period EMAs, all the way down to the very long term, we're actually above the EMA. So what we're seeing here is we're getting a small pullback in what is otherwise a bullish trend. And on the chart, in order from longest to shortest, we actually see the 5 EMAs that Trend Radar is calculating behind the scenes. So by default, down here, we have the 200 EMA, then the 50 EMA, the 21, 13, and 5 EMA, which are represented by these rows in the heat map: 5, 13, 21, 50, 200. So what the heat map's telling us here in a way that's visually easy to catch on to, it's a lot easier than looking at some cluttered lines on the chart, is that the current price has dipped below the 5 EMA. And if we look at the price bars and the 5 EMA line here, we see that's true. Price is below the fast, but it's above all of the others. And likewise, over here in this dark red area, we had a pretty strong pullback where we almost broke through every part of our bullish trend, even down through the longest term EMA. But the 200 EMA here kind of held the line. So we saw this deep pullback, but the long-term bullish trend persisted. So here are some example charts just depicting the kind of scenarios or patterns that you can often see with Trend Radar. So in this case, we had a very strong uptrend on the Tesla 2-hour, where we had total alignment across all periods represented by these dots. We were well above the 5 EMAs on all periods, except for these short little points right here. So here we had a pullback within our uptrend, where in the very short term, we kind of had some consolidation before the uptrend continued. So if you see this kind of action where you're just getting a pullback on the top row and everything else persists, that's really not a strong sign of a reversal. And likewise here, we had another weak pullback. And here, the opposite scenario where we have a strong downtrend. It's very easy to visualize that we're not getting any upwards action here. We see total red on the heat map, and only a couple times do we have a short flicker upwards where we break above the fast EMA's downtrend. So what's great about this is really you're encoding the information of 5 EMAs and price's relationship to them in a way that your brain can just calculate and kind of absorb instantly. You don't have to stare at a bunch of lines. And here we have some kind of more deep or more pronounced pullbacks within an uptrend that you're going to see more in the market as opposed to those much stronger trends we just saw previously. So we like to say that this is a common pattern for healthy pullbacks in a strong uptrend or strong downtrend, where we make it down to the medium term in terms of red cells here. So we have red squares deepening or diving down all the way to the medium term EMA before we bounce and see those indicators return to bullish. Or in the next case, we bounce down to the medium term, price bounces up, but we see our green squares dip down to the medium term here, the middle line, before finally price continues with the overarching downtrend. So those were pullbacks. And here we see what is a common way a reversal might happen, where we see a sputter of the opposite direction kind of start to creep into the heat map. And then we see a gradual fall as price breaks through all of these supporting EMAs. And we see the shift to the other color. And this is just the inverse scenario where we have a downtrend gradually reverse into an uptrend. And finally, what we'll see a lot of is sideways or indecisive action. And that kind of tends to look like this with Trend Radar, where there's a lot of noise here. You have a bearish signal down on the long trend, and then we have kind of intermittent sputterings of bullish action, bullish, a bullish alignment, bearish alignment, etc. And there's no real clear trend. So I'm just putting up Trend Radar here on the NASDAQ futures on the daily, just to show how the indicator looks and how it's pretty easy to get a grasp of what's happening with the market just by looking at it. So here I have it with the default settings, and we can see that for a very long while on the daily, as we zoom back, we've been in a very pronounced uptrend. And even relative to the action that we see here recently in the last, since January, we really haven't had this much bearish action or this much bearish alignment where we see we're red on all time frames, all periods, since pre-corona. So even the corona dip only really lasted. We only saw a bearish alignment across all of the periods for maybe 1/6 or 1/7 of the duration of what we're seeing now. This type of dip, I just think it's a great example of how it encodes the information nicely. So this might not be so obvious just looking at the chart, but this has actually been a very extended period of bearish action, compared to anything we've seen even in the past 4 or 5 years. So I find it's a very easy way to absorb a lot of information on the short and long-term trends. So here we see we had a little pumping up here into bullish action on the short, medium term, but it was quickly reversed. And last little example here, I put it on a 15-minute chart for, I think this is Houston Energy. And I just wanted to demonstrate how the EMAs work. So here on the 15-minute, we kind of had pronounced bearish action where we kept dropping back into total bearish downtrend here with red on all time frames in Trend Radar until we had this spike up here on the 27th of May, where finally all time frames broke to the long side, to a bullish sentiment, and the bullish alignment kind of lasted longer than it has for a long time. And although we had this big sell-off here and some intermittent pullbacks in the shorter term periods, we see that the long-term bullish trend has still kept up, and we've seen price continue to go up. And when I enable the EMAs representing the different rows of Trend Radar, we can kind of see how that occurs. We're fighting with the shorter term EMAs, but the long term, we've stayed above it in this uptrend.
We had some questions coming in. Does Trend Radar work on all markets? The answer is yes, of course. It's based on price action, and every market that has price action, which is basically every market, this indicator can be used for. So whether it's commodities, indices, stocks, ETFs, futures, currencies, cryptos, yes, all of these can benefit from this indicator. And perhaps one more comment, the green dot at the bottom is an additional help for you, which basically tells you if the 5 EMAs that Nicola was talking about, if they are stacked. And what that means is they are ordered. For a bullish stacking of these EMAs, the slowest EMA is at the bottom. On top of it is the second slowest, then the medium EMA, then the second to fastest, and then the fastest. They're all ordered this way. Whenever you see such a dot, it means these NA are stacked bullish, or vice versa. When you see a red dot, it means they are stacked bearish.